I'm Dr. Maureen Hayes, joining you from Galveston, Texas, and I'm joined by our regulars, Jim and Glenn from San Antonio, Texas. Jim's our big money man, and Ann is our beautiful nutritionist and personal trainer. And standing in for Dr. Lee Osler is the amazing Dr. Ray Dixon, all the way from Thailand. And he's got an amazing background and such a perfect complement tonight to our special guest because Dr. Dixon is a chiropractor and a naturopath. And he brings a wealth of knowledge and information to the team. And tonight we have, back by popular demand, one of our favorites, Dr. Carolyn Hoffman. What? Don't throw me off, girl. From Charlottesville, Virginia. She too is a naturopath and extremely board certified in naturopathic medicine, also certified in like integrative medicine.
Digestive health, and enzyme therapy, lymphatics, all sorts of things.
All sorts of things. So yeah, so we're gonna have a fantastic conversation tonight, not only about redox, but also about healthy lifestyle, because we've got a couple of experts here who can tell us several experts here who can tell us about nutrition. I'm just really good at eating, but they're going to tell you what you need to eat. So this is going to be fantastic.
You and me will do that.
Yeah, we're good at that.
Too funny.
So without further ado, I'm going to bring Dr. Carolyn on, and she can give you a little bit more of her background, kind of tell you maybe, if you don't mind introducing, in case we have new people on here, tell a little bit about what redox is, why we're on here talking about this, and kind of how it came into your life and to your attention, and where that's led you to from here. Thanks, Carol.
Absolutely. Delightful. Love to be with all of you. You're all also great fountains of information. So you could do this without me. But anyway, so as a background of naturopathy, I actually came into natural health by default. My previous career until I was 40 was in the field of professional ballet, totally different area. But I'd experienced a car accident that had taken that career away from me. And at that point, I didn't realize that I had fibromyalgia. Nobody was really diagnosing it back in the 80s, other than you're kind of crazy, because you got all these multiple amounts of vague pains wandering around, and nobody really knew what to do with that. But they basically just said I guess I was kind of fortunate. They were going to operate on my neck because I had a neck injury, spine injury. By the grace of God, because that's really the only way we can say it, they actually took some studies on me and said, we're not going to operate. Actually, it would make it worse. But they had no solutions for me. They just said, you'll have to live with pain for the rest of your life. And I'd already experienced about 5 or 6 years of intense pain and no sense of quality of life at all. So that was kind of depressing, but long and short of it was my entree into the natural health arena, even as a skeptic back then, because as a ballet dancer, everybody was orthopedic, traditional MDs, the notion back in the 80s of doing something natural just wasn't really even a conversation at that point. So I was very skeptical when my husband was actually introduced to the notion of magnetic therapy, and I thought my family were all totally crazy. But to cut to the short story on that was, about 6 to 8 months later, after using different technologies, I ended up not having any of those problems to do with the fibromyalgia. And I came to realize what fibromyalgia was once I actually started to work in the natural health field. I put it together as to what I'd been suffering. But that got me intrigued, because suddenly now I had my life back, and it wasn't through drugs. And so it was like, this is really interesting. I had 3 kids, so I wasn't ready to go back to full-time school on the West Coast and do naturopathy that way, but I was just really interested, and I started searching out lots of people to study with. So I would fly up to Minneapolis to work with a Russian doctor on whole foods, raw food eating and cancer and thermography. I mean, I was doing thermography in the early 90s when nobody was talking about that. And so I was just cherry picking and just sucking up all this information and then dispersing it, because I love to teach to people, because that was also my background. So we actually invested in a wellness center. We created the first wellness center in the late 90s in Charlottesville, Virginia, and nobody was into that at that time at all. Pulled in an acupuncturist who was also a chiropractor. We taught about stress management and nutrition, and that's kind of where I started also with applied kinesiology. Kinesiology was definitely part of my training as a dancer, so that was kind of a link into things. And then it was just, I got to go find out more. So I just kept studying and taking certifications, and then eventually moved on to doing naturopathy. In that journey, a lot of my research had been predicated through things that were going on in our family. So my son was diagnosed with autism at the age of 5. So that was my first deep dive. Wasn't going to be drugs. We weren't going to do those kinds of things. I knew that much. My mother got diagnosed with pancreatic, bladder, and breast cancer, metastatic stage 4, and they gave her 2 months to live. And she said, "I'm not interested in any of the traditional treatments. I don't want to waste my time there." So that was where I really dived deeply into, okay, what the heck am I going to do for her while she's around to help her? And so nutrition and lymphatic therapy, homeopathy, all of the adjunct things, detoxification became a big part of what I was researching and studying with. And then I ended up having another car accident, but this time I had a traumatic brain injury, which really put me out of things for about 2 years. But that intersected me with an MD that lived next door, who was also an MD, he was a DO, so an osteopath. And he started treating my neck, and we ended up opening a practice together and did functional medicine for about 8 years together. That led me into how do I rehab the brain through QEEG and teaching other people. And so I was doing gut brain stuff with the enzymes and just, I'm kind of all over the place. So Maureen, when you say to me, what is it that you have? It's just really been acquiring lots of technologies and lots of knowledge, because to me, as a naturopath, that's our toolbox, the toolbox to try and find what is it that somebody needs to heal. And in this journey, well, I had actually just gone back to being on my own. I wanted to be more independent again in 2017. And at that time, I intersected again for the second time, oddly, with ASEA Redox. I had looked at it very briefly in 2011 and turned it down. I didn't really appreciate the significance of it. I was actually working in nitric oxide stuff and NRF2 pathways and enzymes, and didn't realize that was all redox because nobody was naming it that back then. But in 2017, I took a look at it somewhat reluctantly in terms of the business side of it. I wasn't really interested. I was kind of curious about the technology, but I think that I probably wouldn't be where I am today if we hadn't had this big shift for my husband. My husband had been suffering with exercise-induced breathing challenges for about 22 years. So in that journey through my experience, I'd always been trying everything possible to get him off of assistive technology or oxygen tanks or nebulizers, or when we couldn't control it, 911 visits to the ER. And it was fascinating to me when I had him start drinking this blue bottle that we'll talk about what's in it and what it is, but the liquid, that in a week of using it, I started to see that he was moving differently. And I don't know about, sorry guys, but I find that very often women are much more in tune with their health than guys are. So you don't always pay so much attention to what's happening. But I was kind of just observing him and watching patterns. And I thought, well, I don't know, it kind of looks like he's moving more easily. I don't see him going for his inhaler as much. And anyone who listens about this might come to know the phrase called the magic 8, right? Where we double up and we go to 8 ounces of liquid a day. And I've been listening to these stories and I said, I don't know, you might want to try 8 ounces a day. I said, I've got no clue. I said, but I do keep hearing a lot of people talk about breakthroughs that happen at that level. So we moved at the end of the first week to the 8 ounces a day. And a week later, it was like a whole new person. I mean, 22 years of challenges just changed in that week. And suddenly he was able to take on what I thought was kind of going to be a disastrous occupation of cutting down trees and climbing trees and chainsawing things he'd never been able to do for the last 22 years without risking the ER. And I'm sure we all know, right? When we have a challenge and it gets a little better, we don't always realize that it's moved on, right? That we've actually improved until there's this aha. So at the end of this week, when we had this project to do and we had to get these trees down in the next day, and he says, oh, well, I'll do that. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, we'll be lucky if we make it to lunchtime. We're going to be at the ER by lunch. But instead, he just worked the whole day, never touched his inhaler, and, you know, came in at the end of the day. And I kind of asked the question, and I said, how are you feeling? I mean, I kind of knew, but I just wanted to see if he'd really kind of registered. And he said, good. And I said, you know, how many times have you used your inhaler? And he said, oh, I haven't. And that was my big aha, because I had to say, okay, what the heck is this that can make such a difference in 2 weeks when all these other things that we'd had him on for all these years had never made that kind of a change? And so that brought me to want to understand what is redox technology and what is redox as a whole. And so for those of you who are not familiar with it, I like to think of it as just like our computers have an operating system that enables them to talk accurately. Our cells have the same thing. And in that production of energy for us to exist and for everything to happen in the body, we have these little battery packs inside every single cell called a mitochondria that we may well remember from biology at school. Right? But it basically churns, no, that's it, Jim. It churns out the energy that propels us to talk, to think, to breathe, for everything to happen. And then there are these curious little molecules that go with it called redox signaling, and they're positive and negative charges. They're basically highly charged sources of energy for the body, but they flip on and off switches that are really the operating system of how every cell communicates within itself and between the cells to make sure that our body is able to do what it's designed to do, which is to stay healthy. And so in doing that, it enables it to communicate, to search and rescue a damaged cell and to get in there and find and locate it and be able to say, do I need to repair this damaged cell, or do I need to delete it and replace it with a nice new healthy one, because it's either too old and it needs to shuffle on, right? Or maybe it's sick and we really don't want it there causing problems. Or maybe it's just not as efficient as it needs to be, but we want to replace that. And that's really what the body's designed to do. It's meant to heal. I mean, the body knows what to do. It's not designed to promote sickness. But the beauty of what we have here is that those are highly fleeting molecules. They're rather like fireworks. And scientifically, everybody said you could never stabilize something that happens that fleetingly within the human body in the cell outside the human body. But that's the brilliance of what we have, because it's a breakthrough in science to be able to replicate exactly what is going on in us, be able to rebuild it on a daily basis. So I love it because it helps every one of us put ourselves in the driver's seat of our own health.
Exactly.
Carolyn, in the beginning, when you were looking at it, did you look at the bottle and go dietary supplement made from salt water?
I don't actually think I did. I think because I kind of somewhere knew in the back of my brain that that was the salt water thing that people had talked about, and that was kind of like 6 years before. I met with my sponsor is Dorothy Dabney, who I recall told me about it, but honestly, I mean, she will laugh and know that when I met her fleetingly at some coffee event, I thought she talked about doing something called a Syra, and that in my world is an actual technology that does scanning. And I remember thinking, she's into art and things like that. What the heck is she doing in natural health? And she had spoken quietly, and I misheard her. And of course, it was a seer, not a Syra. So when we met for coffee and she starts talking about a seer, within me, I'm going, oh gosh, you know, I wouldn't have come if I'd known she was going to talk about a seer, because mentally I'd said no back in 2011. So that was the kind of humor of the piece. She gave me some of the gel technology, which is the topical application of it. I stuck it in my pocket, not really that interested, but feeling kind of guilty. And again, it was really a few weeks later, my husband injured and re-injured, shall we put it this way, an old gymnastics injury from college time, and he kind of bothered it, and it was causing him a lot of discomfort. And after letting him limp around for about 3 weeks in a lot of discomfort, my brain suddenly connected that I had this tube, and I said, oh, I have this tube that Dorothy says is supposed to be really good for things that hurt. I said, oh, hang on, let me go find that. And I kind of rummaged around to find it, and it had this little explanation that we all are very familiar with, of being able to use this 3 times in 5 minutes for the discomfort. So I just was kind of excited, because that's, you know, when you get new technologies, you want to see how they work, right? And so it was like, you can be my guinea pig. And so I gave him all these instructions. Okay, how much does it hurt? Rate your discomfort, move around. Where does it hurt? And then we applied the gel for 3 times and then waited another 5 minutes. And bingo, of course, like we so often see, things didn't hurt the same. And so that caught my curiosity enough that I guess it was just the way things go in life. Dr. Silverman was actually coming into Charlottesville, hadn't been for a long time, but he was coming to do a talk at a hotel on the science. And of course, I love to learn. So it was like, okay, I'm going to go. And, I rounded up a few friends that I knew were either clients that I'd helped or friends who were always proactive about their health. I mean, a lot of us are like that. We're always looking for, how do we biohack everything? How do we keep ourselves at our peak? And so I kind of reached out to a few and said, why don't you come? I'm going to listen to this thing. I mean, I will be very transparent that I understand the power of this business model. And my mindset was, I'm not going to go to this thing and be excited and then have to try to translate this and tell someone else. Let me smartly take some people who might also see what I see. And if we all like it, then we've already got people involved. And, because I knew that if I liked what I saw, I was naturally going to be sharing it with other people. And from a business perspective, the one thing that I had always hoped for and have been frustrated with in the previous 10 years was, I was working with all of these supplements and things like that I could not get overseas to clients. And I had overseas clients because I did scanning with them. And so we would do these overseas calls, and then we would know what they needed. And then we would find they weren't, those things weren't available in their countries. And so that was really frustrating for me. So in a way, I'd always been hoping that, wouldn't it be wonderful to have a product that could be delivered everywhere, that I didn't have to stock? And so here it was, was suddenly now I've got a company who does all the research, and I don't have to stock it, but I can actually help people with something that I believe in. And so that was exciting, because suddenly that opens up a much bigger capacity as a practitioner to be able to help people all over the world, and not just the ones that you sit right in front of.
So,
hey, Jim,
ahead,
I just want Carolyn to go back, because you said something that was so brilliant. You said you brought other people with you because you thought if you were interested that they might be in, and that it saved you or spared you from having to give the information out or teach them about it. And you know what, that is so huge, because there's a lot of webinars that people can get into. There's different events, live events. And if you bring people, because what we find is a lot of people say, I want to see what it does for me first. If it works on me, then I'm going to share it with other people. And it's like, it's science. It's a bioreplenishment agent. Everybody's different. For me, I was one of those people who said, actually, I didn't even say that. I said, I'm not telling anybody. I was like, I'm a physician. I'm drinking salt water from Salt Lake City. I'm not telling anybody, this is ridiculous. But I did offhandedly share it with a few people. But what was funny is that the people I shared it with actually had a response faster than I did. Yeah. So, for those of you out there who are thinking, maybe in your head, you've got a list of people that you think might benefit or might need to hear about this, take them, like Dr. Carolyn did, to an event or to a webinar, even to one of our webinars like tonight, and let them hear about it and let them be able to have the experience at the same time that you do. I think that was absolutely brilliant, and I didn't want to let that go.
Well, to your point, from a couple of perspectives. I mean, the thing is, we can never possibly, this is a deep topic, right? I mean, how long have we all been involved in it? And, when I listen to people and they say, well, I just want to work out exactly one phrase where I could communicate to somebody what this is. And they seem to think that magic phrase will have everybody going, oh yeah, I want that. I mean, it's, even knowing what we know, Maureen, being on the medical board, I mean, it's just not possible. It's a deep field of science. I think we learn an awful lot about it the more we're involved in it as well. It teaches us things. So if you go to something that is, an hour-long conversation, how can you possibly communicate anything really significant about that to somebody else? They're not going to feel and be as inspired as you are because they haven't heard the whole story. So I knew that there was no way I was going to communicate anything that significant. So I wanted to cut that kind of conversation out and the other side is I think it's important to let people make their own decisions, right? That we're not convincing somebody else just because we've become inspired. I mean, I'm not saying I don't think we want to share what we have and invite people to learn, but I think ultimately our job is to give them a chance to be educated, to answer the questions, and then they make their own choice. But to your point, and here would be a lovely one, right? So I got this product. I did not drink this product. I didn't, right? When I look at what I have, when I'm sharing in my clinic, I mean, I have access to like about 600 different products. I don't try them all to see what they're going to do. I look at the science. Why would I take a product that's about diabetes if I don't have diabetes? Why, so it makes no sense because we're all entirely different. And to your point, Maureen, someone else's response from their body, maybe that their body responds much faster than yours does. Now, my personal journey, so I watched my husband, that shifted in 2 weeks. I did share it. The next person I shared it with was actually not a client yet. She'd been referred to me. She had had 3 different experiences with autoimmune condition from the kind of insects that we get a lot around the east coast of the United States. And she had had 30 years of suffering with that condition. She'd been all over the place with, traditional doctors, non-traditional, and she had been referred by one of my clients. But I wanted her to finish what she was using before she saw me. But when I started reading on the biology and trying to understand more why my husband had had this big shift, I kept thinking, well, I wonder if this is the missing link, because let's also define, it's not nutrition, it's not CBD oils, it's not essential oils, it's not homeopathy, right? It's none of those things. It's about chemical and electrical communication. It's about signaling. So it's not something you can kind of grasp because there's actually no materials in it, which is the beauty of why no one's been able to reverse engineer what we have, because they can't pour it out and analyze it because it's not salt water. So I just thought to myself, well, this is not something she's done before. And so I called up and I said, look, I'm deeply into this book. And at that beginning, I said, don't even ask me to explain it fully. I said, because I'm still trying to wrap my brain around it. I said, but I do know it's something you haven't done before. It's about how our cells communicate. It's right at the very essence of that. And if they don't communicate, maybe all these other things you're taking aren't really being beneficial. And I said, I'm going to make a suggestion that you try this for 3 months before you come and see me. I said, because maybe it's the thing that'll unlock things for you. I kind of figured somewhere that this was kind of, really connective, and that hunch is true. So she went ahead and she started this, and in 30 days, this woman had a 90% shift in her health, right? That's 30 years of tragedy going on where this woman couldn't work, couldn't do anything, couldn't think, didn't have a memory. She hurt all over the place. She had a job as a radio presenter in New York before all of these challenges. And now, she's back doing her life again. So it was another one of those major ahas for me. But personally, when I finally started taking it, it was 3 to 9 months before I saw improvements, right? But those were huge changes because, I had gone through a car accident that not only had given me the traumatic brain injury, but I'd injured my colon, and my colon and my brain ceased to communicate anymore. And anyone who's a woman knows that, I mean, we have to have bowel movements on a regular basis, but as a woman, if we're not, it's even more of a challenge for us in terms of promoting cancer. So I had struggled for 10 years with this. Even as a digestive health specialist, I figured I got this done. I was good. I could not. I was taking more and more and more supplements in order to just function on a daily basis, and that was a real challenge. But at month 3, things started to change for me. And by the time I got to month 9, I was off all those supplements, and my brain and my gut had found out how to talk again after 10 years. So if I had made a decision that, well, it's got to work for me first before I tell anyone else, how many other people would not be where they are today because they wouldn't have had that opportunity to see what it was going to do for them?
Right.
Dig a little bit deeper into that, Carolyn. Because so many people, they're expecting a rapid response. And
Amazon Prime.
Yeah, exactly. And the microwave, mentality of people. But so what do you say to people who, even though you don't feel it, it's working? Maybe Dr. Ray, if you want to pop in on that as well after Carolyn, but is it always working? Does it have to work? And then Ray, I want you to please do the medical disclaimer as well. Or Carolyn, if you want to pop in with that. I mean, it's just, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it is one of the challenges that we are an Amazon Prime society, right? And I hate it when people come, they don't get their resolution with a drug, and drugs push the body, right? I mean, that's allopathic. I mean, right, it's against nature. It forces the body to do something chemically, even though we get a pushback, and which is why people keep getting more and more and more drugs, because, the body's trying to reorganize itself. And then they come to natural health and they think that, if it doesn't all change in a month, it didn't work.
Right.
The body doesn't work like that. We didn't get there overnight. And I love to show the picture. I'm sure you've all seen pictures like it, right? Where we have an iceberg, and some of it's above the water, but most of it's below the water. Well, the basis of all of our health is going on below the surface. We don't get to look at all of that and realize. So when do we notice that something has been out of balance for a time? It's when we have a symptom. It is remarkable to me that everybody thinks that the body should, just because they expect it, respond like that. And that if it doesn't, then it's not working. I mean, we have no clue what's going on below the surface that may be a lot more serious than the things like our creaky knees that we may be aware of, or whatever the thing is that brings us to natural health. And so I try to teach people. I mean, we do have to have those conversations. Of course, it's not always possible, but it is, and I know from the medical board, we've had a lot of conversations recently about this, that consistency and time makes an enormous difference with this particular product technology, because it's not working, we're working, we're just rebuilding what we're losing from puberty. And that's something we haven't mentioned. Why should we do this? It's because it's the inbuilt arc of aging that starts around late puberty and goes on. Everything goes downhill, right? Mitochondria go, collagen goes, stem cells go, the redox goes. It's all part and parcel of that. But I actually have a study that I talk about when I do presentations that was in 2016. I think it's Harvey is his name. And he talks about the fact that they notice a shift in redox with age, that redox is essential to homeostasis, in other words, health, and that a sustained deviation, which is what we have with age, all right, means we promote disease. There it is, right? That to me is like, there you go, right? This is the thing that keeps us all healthy when we're young, right? Why are our kids super healthy? Why have they got bucket loads of energy? Why did they recover so fast? All those things they don't experience if they fall over. They don't break bones like we do in our 40s or 50s. And heaven help us if we're in our 60s, 70s or 80s, because very often we don't recover from that because we don't heal as fast, directly related to the amount of redox that we're naturally producing in the system. So if we know this is the thing that science tells us needs to be in balance for health, And the more we're out of balance, the more we promote disease. And somebody says to you, you can bioreplenish with an identical form of redox signaling that is non-toxic. You can't be allergic to it because as we all speak, we're manufacturing it. Otherwise, we faceplant in 3 minutes or less, right? And what is so beautiful, especially in this space, and I'm sure, Ray, you'll talk about that too, is that within nutrition, no matter how brilliant nutrition is, everybody can still be reactive or allergic to it in some shape or form because herbs have those kinds of potent capacities. And so they can interfere with drugs, no matter how brilliant the supplement is. This is transparent to medication. It's the only thing I know that you can safely give to literally everybody and just track the changes and watch how your body is responding. Because if you had this much when you were younger and you've now got this much, right, and you build back that quantity in the body, you're kind of marching the body back to a space where it had more power in the cells. It had an ability to respond much faster. So we get the chance to say, body, if we feed you enough, maybe you can reset some things, right? And stuff changes.
Exactly. That's great.
Great. Disclaimer?
Yeah.
Ray, go ahead and do the disclaimer, Ray.
Sure.
And then add what you want to that.
Well, it's a little hard act to follow. Carolyn's done a great job. Yeah, she did a fantastic job at explaining it. The education is key, as has been suggested. It's all an education journey, and none of us just come to the conclusion immediately that this is it, thanks, I'm in. No one does that. The disclaimer of ASEA is they do not claim to treat, cure or prevent any disease. They are simply providing the body with what the body needs to heal itself. Very specific reasons why we put it that way. In fact, all natural medicines are similar, no matter what form they take. Redox just happens to be at the pinnacle of all of them. So we're providing the body. The body is the healer. The body was designed to heal itself, as Carolyn has said. It's not designed to create and cause sickness. It is a lack of what the body needs to be able to keep healthy that puts us in a situation where we go down that slippery slope into sick cells. And it's collectively, firstly, let me just say, as Carolyn has said, when cells begin to deteriorate, you have no idea. There's up to 100 trillion cells in the human body. 20 billion approximately are dying every day. They need to be replaced. Now, they're being replaced by similar cells. So if those cells are becoming malfunctioning by degree, subtly, then as they reproduce, you are getting that version of a somewhat malfunctioning cell. And it's only when they collectively, at very high numbers, reach particular points of disability or malfunctioning, you land in what's called your disease. So that's when you get diagnosed. So the diagnosis is not the process of getting the disease. That can take months to years, and in many cases, many years. Then you're diagnosed. This also factors back into what you asked, Jim, and Caroline has emphasised, and Maureen, that sickness is a journey, equally becoming well is a journey, and journeys take time. We're in the three-dimensional world here, so the time is very, very significant. And it's very interesting when we have these calls, and part of that education process for all the listeners to connect, engage, and have their ha-ha moment is in some cases to hear the same thing said in many different ways. So Caroline has used some great metaphors and analogies today. We all use our own ways of trying to get this message across. And the beauty of Dr. Maureen and all manner of health professionals and Anne as a nutritionist is that we can express this in our own different ways as part of our education tools and our own education, which helps you to perhaps be able to have your ha-ha moment. Oh, that makes sense. Many times we as practitioners are saying the same thing over and over to someone, and then somebody else says the same thing in a different way, and they get it, and we go, I've been trying to tell you that for the last 3 months or 6 months. And that's just, again, that the person needs to hear it in a particular way for it to make sense to them. So I think it's an extraordinary journey for all of us. I came in, you notice how a lot of people come in through ill health. A lot of people came to natural medicine from ill health and failed allopathic treatments. I'm older than, I think, Caroline, I believe, and when I had asthma way back in my teenage years, and it was effectively removed and cured, because I've never had it since, and I'm 68, by a naturopath. I had no idea what a naturopath was. I actually went to do yoga with his wife, and it was her suggesting I have this natural treatment for my asthma that led me to have the treatment, and I've never had that since. Now, when you have an experience like that, all of a sudden your whole world has changed. It's like, well, I didn't know what a naturopath was. I didn't know what a chiropractor was. I didn't know what an osteopath was. My family were traditional medical followers. That changed my whole world and has ever since. So much so that I became what he was, a naturopath and a chiropractor. And when this particular product arrived, just reiterating and in some ways showing this journey for all of you and the new people on the call, I also was very suspicious. I'd never heard of redox signaling. I was told about it by a 5-time heavyweight karate champion of the world, who was a supreme athlete. I thought I knew everything after 40 years. So I just didn't pay any attention. It took me more than 2 years before I even remotely began to have a look at the science, and then realised this was a thing. And then I realised it's more than a thing. It's the latest discovery in science. Redox signalling molecules was under no discussion prior to 1998. You will not find it in any textbooks. You won't find it even in traditional philosophies of Chinese medicine or Ayurveda or any other, because science had never discovered redox signaling molecules until 1998. Now, there's no doubt in the philosophies of those natural healing systems, be it homeopathy with vitalism and vital force, be it in Ayurveda, yogic traditional philosophies, you will see it referred to as prana. If you go to Chinese medicine, you will see it referred to as qi or qi. These are directly connected to redox signaling molecules. They just didn't know the name redox signaling molecules. It was invented in 1998 and thereafter, exploding ever since. So this is an exploding area of medical science. It's the holy grail. And they're trying through big pharma to manipulate these redox signaling molecules because they control the DNA. The redoxome controls the genome. So you've got a big chase on to try and get the magical cures for everything. The irony in all of that, and then I'll go quiet for a while, the irony in all of that is that Redox has been able to package them the same as your body makes in the mitochondria of all cells, and just supply them to you naturally and let your body decide what needs to be done by simply, as Caroline said, getting you back to the optimum levels you once had when you were a peak puberty teenager. So that's when you peaked. So if we can just put them into the body, let the body then do what it needs to do, because physiologically where you have all landed is not the same. So this is your individualistic side. Unless you have an identical twin living on exactly the same food, same diet, same amount of water, breathing the same amount of air and the same quality air, then there is no one like you. Mm-hmm. But the bodies all run on redox. All your bodies, animal, plant, cells, people, run on redox. Put the redox in, watch the magic happen.
Oh, that's awesome, Dr. Ray. Thank you. And Maureen, if you don't mind, before we jump into the nutrition side real quick, can you kind of go why this was going to go FDA? It was going to be a massive drug, but it couldn't go that route because a lot of people are going to go, well, why doesn't my doctor know about it? Why didn't you know about it, Dr. Maureen? Why weren't you using this back in your practice? So I think people need to understand why we even are talking about it here today, and it wasn't flushed down the commode by Big Pharma a few years ago.
Well, that's a great question. And my husband and I have been using the products for, over 11 years now. And I had never, when it was brought to my attention, it was actually kind of like Carolyn. It had to come across my attention a couple of times before I paid any attention. The first time somebody sent me information and I was like, oh, please, I'm a physician, I call it my era of arrogance and ignorance. It's okay to be ignorant, but to be ignorant and opinionated is very dangerous. So anyway, the second time it came around, I had never heard that verbiage before, redox. I did not know it was a contraction of reductants and oxidants, which would take you back to, high school and college chemistry. But what was interesting is the person who brought it to me had a background in computer sales. So I was like, what? And I was telling my sister about it. My sister is not a scientist or medical professional, but she's a medical editor. And she happens to be a medical editor at my medical school, the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. And I was talking to her about this. Now, as a anesthesiologist and pain specialist, I don't look at cell biology or cellular function. So this is not necessarily something that would come up in my journals that would be talking about it, about mitochondria and things like that. That's not really where our focus was. And it's interesting because, once you super specialize, you're kind of in a tunnel, you've got tunnel vision. So I was telling her about it and she said, I've heard of that. And I was like, how could you have heard of it? And she said, well, we just got a $10.5 million grant from the NIH to study it in the body for cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative, orthopedic, diabetes, cancer, aging, obesity, you name it. And I was like, what? And she sent me the press release. Now that was a God thing because I was going to discount it again. I live in Galveston, Texas on an island surrounded by salt water. The notion of, and salt water has some great medicinal properties to it, maybe not the Gulf where I am, but, the idea of paying for it and drinking salt water just seemed kind of ridiculous to me. And I didn't understand at that time that it was energized, and it's interesting because you were just talking about some different things, Dr. Ray, about, prana and different life forces. And I was certified in acupuncture. And I was thinking about that issue we're talking about. It's something that, to increase chi that we used to do was called Ming Men. And you would take the needles and cross them and hook them up to electrodes. And I was like, wow, you would think that I would understand this a little bit better, understanding driving energy into that, the life force that way. So just an interesting aside there. But anyway, when we first got started, being allopathic doctors, traditional Western trained, even though I was a little integrative, I wasn't, I guess, as open as I thought I was, because I was hung up on that FDA thing. And my husband and I had the opportunity, we got involved, and a lot of you have heard our story. My husband had a big health challenge. He's a physician as well, but, and he got treated traditionally for it, which left him super compromised. And you would think as two doctors, we would have expected this, but we didn't. And, he had something that, his diagnosis was such that if you have a complication, they're like, yes, but you had this. I mean, even for people who, don't make it, they're like, they had that, and it was like, as anesthesiologists, you better wake up at the end of your surgery or we're in big trouble. So, we kind of missed that whole thing, of having so many complications from this treatment. And so we got on the product and we tried it, but we were still hung up on that FDA thing. And we were blessed to be able to have dinner with Vertus Norton, who was the founder of the company. And we kind of pressed him for why was this not FDA approved? Because the original technology was developed by a medical biotech company. Long story, they were trying to do experiments to get FDA approval as a drug, couldn't determine an archaic thing called the LD50, which is used for dosing. And it's where, 50% of the animals you give it to perish. I think they have different dosing structures now, but that's sort of the gold standard, and they couldn't determine it. The more they gave to the animals, the better they did. So the FDA said this is not a drug. This is at best a supplement. There's a lot of money in drugs and pharmaceuticals. There's not a lot of money in supplements. And so they lost all their investors. Our founder happened to be on the board. He was brought in to see if he could find more money for them, but it was too little, too late. They were being sold off by their mother company as, like a fire sale. He stepped in, put together a group of investors and bought the rights to the technology. And when we said to him, couldn't you push and get this FDA approved? And he said, probably, but it would take at least 10 years and probably that many more millions of dollars. And you would have to go to your physician. It would have one indication. And this is true. This is how drugs work. And he said, we already knew how powerful it was, and we knew it was 100% non-toxic. And he said, we decided to give it to the people and let science catch up. And that's exactly what we did. So, you think about it, if they had held it and forced that FDA approval, and you guys, I think we're blessed that it's not FDA approved. We're blessed that it is a supplement, that you don't have to go to your doctor, that you can get it from somebody who just has the, the grace to educate you about it. Think about how many lives have been changed. So anyway.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And now with 10 minutes, 12 minutes left, Carolyn, all three of you and Ann, nutrition. It seems to be something, we've got the foundation now, but nutrition seems to be something that everybody is, even if you do have, like Ann, perfect, great nutrition, it's still, your products are still not nutritionally what they were, as dense as what they were. And then, so can you touch on that real quick, Carolyn? Because it's a huge area that we really don't spend enough time on. Can you touch on that real quick, please?
Yeah, I mean, it's something it's really important. I think people understand a bit more than they certainly did in the 90s when I first started teaching this, that it's really important that we have food-based supplements, things that come from foods, not synthetic versions of something, because the body doesn't recognize what to do with something that's a synthetic version of a vitamin C, ascorbic acid, for example. And then there's a lot of compromising that goes on in the body. So the beauty is that, with the products that they've chosen here is, A, they're not too huge in terms of breadth. We have 4 main products, and they really all target key things that are essential. Why do we need supplementation? Because, as you mentioned, the food sources that we have nowadays are more and more and more compromised. I mean, probably at the worst we've ever been. So we're all nutrient deficient, no matter how, and you can kind of say, well, I'm organic and I do this and I do that. But at the end of the day, the way that food's grown, the sources from where it comes from, the soil is depleted, so the actual food doesn't have what we need. So we're all in a space where in the 80s, maybe you were kind of forward thinking if you were doing supplementation. To me, nowadays, this is something that everybody needs to have some kind of at least foundational supplementation in their life to make up for the things that are not in our food. And we have this beautiful combination of really, in a sense, we could think of it as a multivitamin. Is a lot bigger than that with our source product in terms of, covering all those phenomenal vitamins that we can think of that we need, land minerals, sea minerals, which are essential, because if you take vitamins, but you don't have minerals in your body, then your body can't really use those vitamins anyway. It has enzymes in there, which is, so working in the enzyme field, that's another cofactor that's essential for, utilizing all of these things. And it is a very broad but beautiful product that has a lot of cutting edge approaches to how they extract the nutrients that are highly bioactive as well, with our glycomatrix, glycoprotein matrix and things like that. So we cover the omegas. I love, the basis of our omegas in 3, 5s, and 7s, which are phenomenal. They come from the fish. We start harvesting it immediately. And a lot of the challenges with the supply sources for omegas, people don't really realize, is I think there are 3 manufacturing sources in the world for omegas. And by the time they actually get to where they're held and people buy from those sources, and then the quality depends upon how much money they put into refining and getting all the junk out of them, there's a lot of oxidation. So we cut to the chase, and those fish are actually starting to be processed immediately, which means we don't have that oxidation. We have this low totox thing, which means it's not fishy, and the burp that everybody gets. Noreen, I know you love to talk about Life Max. It's your favorite, with the vitality and the cognition and the skin and the brain and the heart and all of those things that are in there. And the other one is our biome. 3 phenomenal prebiotics to set up the staging, and then 16 probiotics. And it's not about massive quantities that can really disrupt the gut, but it's about the varieties that affect all of the organ systems. So, that is the materials. And if we think of it, that's like having gas in the gas tank, but we have to have the spark to burn that and create the fuel, and that's redox. So you can't, you can be plowing in, and my experience is that people take too many supplements when they don't have the lymphatic flow to deal with them, and they don't have the digestion to deal with them, and they actually cause a lot more toxicity. So when we add the redox, what we get is a better utilization of everything and anything, and probably far less of everything that they're taking. So you can reduce the quantity because you get better uptake and assimilation. It's got to get out to the tissue. But I just love our products in terms of they're not massively huge, right? But they target everything that we really need to get in place.
It seems like so many people out there are over supplementing so many different things. And Ann, I'm not sure if you want to address this, but everyone seems to have an opinion on nutrition. And there's a lot of stuff out there, from what I understand, it goes in and it comes out without
bullets.
Yeah. So is that
bullets?
Yeah.
I've never.
Well, that is true. I mean, that was back. We always knew the septic tank cleaners, right, would tell you who had the cheap vitamins, because I would do dissolution exercises with people and take loads of different brands and dissolve them and show them. Sometimes things would sit around for 36 hours. They still hadn't dissolved. That is one of the key things, is that you've got to have something that actually breaks down and it gets to the tissue.
Hey,
Yeah.
talk real quick then about how they interact with redox. Why are ours different from everyone else? And again, I'm not sure if Ann, if that's
Go to Ann. Let Ann talk about that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're synergetically working with redox signaling, and that when they brought it out, I was super excited, because I knew if they took all they did to detail and get redox to the market, and then they brought Renew, and then eventually we got the nutrition, I knew that they would source very specific to get the redox potential through our vitamins. And I love how you've explained, if people haven't found your study on source and your little enzyme talk that you have to look for it, but I've had it for years, and you give a great explanation of what makes our source so different. And if people would really detail out the expense it would take to get all the superfoods, the enzymes, the oils, the sea algae, all these things that make our, only need 4 capsules a day, you would not be able to eat the amount of quantity of food that encompasses the simple 4 vitamins. So I'd say to somebody, if you're on a budget and you can't do all 4, at least do our source. I don't know if you agree. At least start with that as your basic, because that can replace what we're lacking in the typical Western diet, getting in those 4. And obviously, if you can at some point use your loyalty rewards and get an exceptional omega and the biome and Life Max, as you've talked about, then that's going to give you the most optimal health. But if you really have to start out with 1, obviously do redox signaling, get the cells right, and then get the food right by taking ours. And you will see, as we've talked about, the 100% absorption, you're going to get all the nutrients if you would just start, trying ours and seeing what makes ours different. I did want you to touch, because the time's limited, when your daughter got injured and you had her taking extra omega, share that little story, because that's a great testimony of what these can do for inflammation.
Yeah, and what Anne's talking about is that, so our younger daughter was a Virginia Tech grad, and at the time in her final year, she fell down a flight of stairs that are apparently pretty notorious for people falling down. But at the bottom of the stairs was concrete, and she hit her head, so she had a massive concussion. That when we found out about it, they actually said she was lucky she didn't kill herself because of the angle at which she fell. But at the time, I had been doing some research, and randomly I came across some research that they had been doing at Harvard looking at footballers, professional footballers. They've been doing scans of brain pre-injury because, of course, so much concussion in that field. And then they looked at scans of their brain post-injury, and then they'd done comparisons with doing very high doses of omega-3s, and then doing scans, and they were able to actually rehab their brains with very high doses of omega-3s to pre-brain injury levels. And I was like, oh, that was kind of cool. So along comes my daughter, she sails down the stairs, right, hits her head, and she calls me from the hospital and was like, I know exactly what you need. And to your point, so I was looking at the quantities, I had her doing 4 bottles a month at that point. Now, this would be normally 1 month supply would be 1 bottle, but I was looking at the quantities that they used, and I did comparisons out, and I said, okay, I'm sending you 4 bottles, and we got her on that. She was close to finals. It was just like a really critical time for her. Her recovery was remarkably quick. I mean, in 2 weeks, there was this massive turnaround. And I've had some other instances of other people who've had concussions of one sort or another, and I've made that suggestion to them. And every single time we've seen, really significant improvement. So I love that product for all that it offers.
Okay,
awesome.
And dare I ask, we've only got a couple of minutes, but there are a lot of people that are suffering with illnesses, with disease. Is there anything that either of you three or Anne would recommend that people maybe take more of? Your daughter did more of the omega with a brain issue. With people having just general unhealthiness, what would you guys recommend?
Well, certainly, I think, we all know that the older we get, the less we have. We're losing this at 10% per decade, right? In the metabolism of the body, 35 is that pitch point, and everything is downhill from there. They do say that from that on, we can do everything we want. At that point, we're never going to make it back up. So, all right. Obviously, we have less as we get older, therefore it makes common sense. If this is a bio-replenishment of something that's identical, and we had more when we were younger and we were healthier, why wouldn't we therefore try to combat that loss, that increased loss? And it's not just loss, it's efficiency. Those cells become less efficient even with what we have left. So that's that magic 8 that everybody talks about, right? And a lot of our clinical studies are done on 8 ounces a day. Yep, there we go, 4 of those. And we see this bigger, because I call it the renovation crew, right? You got a renovation project to do in the house, and somebody tells you it's going to take a month with 5 people, and you say, well, I only want to employ 1. It's not going to take a month. It's going to take a lot longer, and maybe you won't even get it finished. And that's the whole point about response within the body and time. So if we can boost it and take it quicker, we've got more troops there to get out into the body. And as Ray says, right, go find those problems wherever they are and sort things out and kickstart that cellular conversation of healing that was part of what we were doing before things started to fail. So yeah, taking more, totally safe, right? I mean, sometimes people will drink a whole bottle a day. Hopefully it's not that bad that you feel you benefit that much. But you can, of course, it's non-toxic.
That's right. That's great.
Are there any of the nutritional line that you would take more of, either Maureen or Dr. Ray,
Life
in like a couple of minutes? Maureen, what about Life Max? Go ahead. I know you want to.
Yeah, you can double
I
up.
love Life Max, but you know what? I just put something in the chat. Life Max is it's super specialized. If you're just wanting to hit the basics, and Ray and Carolyn, you can say if you agree with this. The source it's superfoods. It's partially digested. It's very easily assimilated. You're going to get the majority of your vitamins and minerals in that. So that's basic nutrition. That's basic good whole foods. Omegas, everybody needs to be on omegas. You need it for your heart health, your brain health, as Dr. Carolyn was saying. Skin, hair, nails, because we've got the 5 and 7 in there. Joints do well with it. Inflammation, it's amazing. And ours has astaxanthin thrown in there. Good measure. It's incredible. We have learned, this is something that when I went to medical school, nobody talked about your gut. We didn't talk about nutrition. We didn't talk about your gut. Nothing. Now every medical conference talks about the brain gut axis. And you've got to get the gut right to get everything else right. I mean, it's amazing. The DNA in those little bacteria really overshadow our own DNA. I mean, extremely important. LifeMax is my favorite because it combines longevity and vitality. The others are basic. You guys got to get them in there. But if you want to take things to the max, LifeMax, it's got some extra stuff in there that's going to help. It's got medicinal mushrooms in there. It's got things that are going to increase hyaluronic acid and collagen in your skin, along with our other products. It's got things that are going to combat visual changes, cognition, blood pressure, blood sugar, cells going bad, all of those things. So I absolutely, and if somebody is really struggling with a big problem, I love for them to add LifeMax. It's expensive, you guys, but you know what? There's nothing more expensive than being sick, honestly. So invest in yourselves, get those basics down, and then take it to the max.
Would you ever take any more of that one, Maureen?
Oh yeah.
Of the LifeMax?
Hands down.
Is it food? Is it food based or is it
It's 100%
a top
food.
The LifeMax is okay, as well as source. Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Ray, wrap it up. Again, a couple of minutes, please.
Well, thanks, Jim. Look, the basics are always the basics, and we need to not forget those. Fundamentally, naturopathically, naturally, in other words, we need clean food, clean air, clean water. Don't forget the basics as best you can. Then, of course, comes nutritional density. If you're getting healthy, clean food, which would be organic, biodynamically grown, then you're going to have a much higher level of nutritional density in those foods. If you're not, which most of the world isn't, then you definitely need the supplements, as Caroline and Maureen have and Anne have suggested. Now, it's kind of like a tier system, if you like. The Redox, as Caroline has said, is the spark. So to me right now, I don't go too much into the fundamentals of the materials and the nutrition too much at the beginning until I get that spark, which means it's all about Redox for me. And the reason is simple. I see more results by people taking Redox signaling molecules than any other single supplement I've ever used in my life. And I've used thousands of them. And herbs and homeopathy I also studied. So to me, it's Redox first, get the spark. Then it's tier up, clean air, clean water, healthy food. Then comes source for me. I'm just showing you my tier system. I get where you're at, Maureen, in terms of add-ons. I'll get there in a second. So, supplement with a superfood source, and source literally is named accordingly. So you won't get better. You can't take too many of those either. So that's going to do great for your materials. Omega, to me, would follow immediately thereafter. So I would not be not taking an Omega supplement, quite frankly. Biome or a very good pre-probiotic formula it's fundamentally important. If you're doing all the other things and you weren't taking any antibiotics in your life, well, you could probably skip it. But who on the call would meet that criteria? So if you have had lots of antibiotics and you have any kind of gut problem, then you need the biome. LifeMax and other similar adaptogenic formulas, they're add-ons. Now, that doesn't mean they're not important and they don't provide some fundamental nutritional material. They do. But add-on adaptogenic formulas are just driving all of the above further. It's an add-on at the top, but at the top, where you and I are, Maureen, and post 55, then we kind of need the add-ons. So that's where those adaptogenic formulas like LifeMax come into play. And of course, we have all been through journeys of health issues and problems and life experiences with people suffering terribly with health issues. So we kind of are a little bit more aware of where we go with age, exponentially increasing all disease processes, including cancer. I ain't having any of it, and that's why I will never stop using these supplements along with Redox.
Cool. Any last comments, Carolyn?
We've loved having you.
Yeah.
Just to say honestly, this is the single most important supplement that I've ever worked with in over 20 years. And there's nothing else that can do what this does. I mean, the rest are all add-ons, as we say, but you've got to get this in. This is the foundation of the house. If this isn't in place, the rest of it doesn't work anyway.
And it always works, correct?
Correct.
It
It always
cannot not
works.
work.
It cannot not work.
Physiology.
Like Dr. Lee Osler says, we're healing the doctor within, the inner doctor.
Well,
He or she knows how to fix it all.
yeah, we'll have to have Carolyn back because we didn't get to tap much or at all on the skincare, and she's such an expert there. And
And the self-performance
didn't get to
as
talk
well.
about Renew 28 or self-performance.
Yeah.
So
That's because
please
Redox is so
come back.
amazing, you see. We always get stuck.
Yes.
We say this every time.
I know.
We're
We always
happy
say we're
back.
gonna end at the top of the hour, and we never do, right, Maureen?
We're close.
So,
I know, I'm looking at it. We're 7 minutes over. You know, I'm a stickler for that.
okay, I know.
Really did everything.
Yeah,
mean-
forgive me.
Yeah. It's
So,
okay.
guys, thank you. Dr. Ray, thank you for fitting in so beautifully
Yeah.
for Dr. Lee and Carolyn. You're awesome as well. And Maureen, you're the best. And Ann. And we do have a
Yes,
great
Sarah.
guest
Love you too,
next
Jim.
week. Oh, thank you. I don't like patting myself on the back, but we got Dr. Ed De La Reyes. Hear his story.
Mhm.
It's for a double-boarded doctor. He was also an anesthesiologist and a pediatrician as well. He's got a rather remarkable story. So come back, join us next Friday. Please get back to the one that got you on the call. Do not go to Amazon or eBay or Walmart.com to buy the product. Come back to the one that brought it to you, because we educate, we have guarantees, we have warranties in essence, and you get
Free.
us. So with that, guys, thank you so much. The recording will be up at Redox Matters. I'm not sure when, because I'm not sure where Dr. Lee is, but it will be up in the next day or so. So with that, thank you guys, and we'll see you next Friday. God bless.
Thanks, everybody. We
Thank
love
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. This is great.
Thanks. Appreciate you.